Welcome, Mrs. Burkinshaw. Firstly, tell us about your life as a working mother ever since the birth of your son.
Well, Finley was born in June last year, and I was on maternity leave I chose to have 9 months maternity leave. You could have, well, as long as you wanted, but I felt that was when the maternity pay ran out, and so that's when I thought I'd come back to work.
Okay. So, what's life been like then?
It was quite hard at first coming back into it because obviously you've had 9 months off and you've got obviously your son, looking after your son at home, and you've got the pressures of work, so it's quite difficult sort of juggling work life and family life at the same time.
Okay, so obviously whilst you're at work you have to pay for childcare for your son. Approximately how much of your wage goes on the childcare and how do you feel about that?
Childcare is really expensive. I think it's something like £185 a month we pay, but that's only for 1 day a week because we're really lucky in that my mum lives just like around the other side of Leeds, so she looks after him for a day and a half.
All right.
But I mean, it's expensive.
So and obviously, that kind of makes your wage come more into effect then.
Massively.
There's a lot of single working mothers whose a massive chunk of their wage will go on the childcare, leaving them hardly gaining anything.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm really lucky in that respect because if we had to pay for it for 3 days a week, I mean, it's so much money that, at the end of the day, you're not coming out with as much,
from the job. So I suppose obviously you're lucky in the respect that you've got your son's grandparents there to look after him.
Definitely, yeah.
My research shows that mothers with partners, more of them work than single mothers. So to what extent does this surprise you? I mean, because you'd expect single mothers, you'd expect them to need the income more.
Yeah, you would do. But I guess because of the pressures of being a mother, obviously you're looking after a child, you're trying to do all the housework. That's quite a lot. And for me, when I work, at least because I've got a partner, we can share like the housework, and so therefore I have got time to work as well as look after, the child.
Yeah.
Whereas, you would expect more single mothers to work because they need the money, but I guess the pressures must be quite big.
It must be the outside work pressures that get to them.
Yeah,
really.
the family pressures must be huge.
Yeah, obviously like you just said, you share the housework. Obviously, the single mothers have to do that all themselves.
Yeah.
But then again, they need the money for the house, and it's a mixed one that.
But I suppose also it depends upon what job they're doing, because for me, obviously, I can do a part-time teaching job, and because I've got childcare through my mum, it works out that I still come out better if I do work. But I guess if the single mothers didn't have somebody to look after the children, if they're only going to be earning on a part-time wage, it might not be worth their while to do so. Yeah.
What was the main reason why you decided to carry on working after the birth of your son?
Because I suppose the main reason was that although we could probably just afford it upon just my partner's wage, it would leave things really tight, so you'd always have to be watching the budget, your pennies, like thinking ahead to going on holidays or if something went wrong with the car. And also thinking ahead for my son's future. I want to be able to have paid off, most of the mortgage so that I can help him with university fees or deposit for a house or something like that. So if I carry on working now, then there's benefits for him as well as myself long term.
Most definitely. Yeah. So some say that life as a working mother is not as hard as it's made out, and this is due to the fact that we've found the statistic that there's only a 1% difference between working mothers and women without children who work. So it's fairly level. That shows that the female population are willing to work whether they're mothers or not. To what extent do you agree or disagree with the criticism of the pressures?
I'd say that there's huge pressures because although you are working, you're also a full-time mother, so it never stops. And as soon as you get home from work, in the old days you'd get home from work and just prepare your tea and maybe do a bit of work and then relax, whereas now you get home from work, you've got to You know, feed them, bath them, put them to bed, and then it's 7:30 before you can even start to cook your tea and all the rest of it. So I think the pressures are huge. I think probably the reason that lots of women do work with children is because of the economic times that we're in and the fact that house prices are so expensive compared to the wage. Whereas if you look back at like my mum's generation, house prices compared to wages were not as great as they are now. So probably in those days they could afford just to not to work and live on the man's wage.
Okay. So do you feel that your profession and motherhood hold back your social life?
Definitely.
Definitely.
Yeah.
In what way?
Because you're trying to fit everything into a week and there's often not enough hours in the day. So definitely.
Yeah, so what would be your best piece of advice for young mothers to be regarding their employment status after the birth of their child?
I would say, although I've gone back to work, if I didn't have to work, then I would prefer not to do that and to just be with my son all the time. But it's such an individual thing that I just think, yes, listen to the pros and cons of going back to work, but ultimately it's got to be your own decision as to your circumstances and whether you think it's the right thing to do or not. Just to conclude, what would you say is the biggest pressure of being a working mum? Trying to juggle family life, work life and social life.
It's a hard balance to keep, isn't it?
Definitely, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for joining me.
Okay.
That's it.
All right,
Thank
thanks
you.
very much.